The doorbell rang just as I was finishing up a quiet afternoon at home. It had been a long week, and I'd been looking forward to the rare moment of peace. Mark was at work, and I was curled up on the couch with a cup of tea, trying to get lost in a book. But then, the familiar sound of Claire's voice echoed from the hallway. My best friend. I hadn't seen Claire much lately. She'd been busy with work and her own life, but we always made time for each other. Claire and I had been inseparable since college. I was confident in our friendship, trusting her with my deepest secrets and personal moments. And Mark, well, Mark and Claire had been friends long before I came into the picture. I never thought twice about their relationship. I trusted them both completely. As I opened the door, I gave her a smile. "Hey, you're early." Claire stood there, holding a bottle of wine with a mischievous grin on her face. "I thought I'd come by and surprise you. It's been forever since we had a proper girls' night." Her energy was always contagious, but today, something about her felt different. It was like a shadow had crossed over her usual carefree demeanor. But I pushed the feeling aside. She was my best friend. There was no reason to overthink it. After a quick hug, she stepped inside, and I led her to the living room where Mark was lounging on the couch. He looked up and smiled when he saw her. I could tell he was happy to see her. Their bond was strong, built on years of shared history. We spent the next few hours talking, catching up, and having fun. I could see the chemistry between Claire and Mark, but it was nothing out of the ordinary. Their playful banter was always part of the dynamic, and I never questioned it. It wasn't until dinner that things began to feel off. We all sat around the table, sharing stories and laughing, but the conversations were a bit stilted, the air a little too thick with unspoken words. I noticed Claire's eyes lingering on Mark more than usual, and Mark, too, seemed distracted, his attention shifting between her and me. There was an unspoken tension building between them that I couldn't ignore. I tried to push the feeling away, convincing myself I was just overthinking it. But when dinner ended and we moved back to the living room to relax, the atmosphere felt even heavier. Claire and Mark were talking more quietly now, their voices low, their body language closer. It was hard to pinpoint exactly when it happened, but at some point they were sitting side by side, too close for comfort. Then it happened. I stood up to grab dessert from the kitchen, and that's when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of lips meeting. A kiss. I froze in place. My heart skipped a beat, and the air seemed to freeze around me. I knew I should have turned around, should have confronted them then and there, but I couldn't. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor as I processed what was happening. I finally gathered the strength to turn back into the living room, and there they were. Mark and Claire, locked in an embrace, their lips pressed together in a kiss that was far too intimate. It was everything I had feared and more. It was a betrayal so profound that the world seemed to tilt beneath me. I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. My throat closed up, as if the shock had stolen my voice. I stood there, trembling, my hands shaking as I tried to make sense of the scene before me. How long had this been going on? How could they betray me like this? The silence was deafening. Claire was the first to pull away, her eyes wide with guilt. Mark, too, looked guilty, but there was something else in his expression, something I couldn't quite place. He couldn't even meet my eyes. "Well, what the hell?" I finally managed to say, my voice hoarse, broken. Claire quickly stood up, her face flushed with embarrassment. She looked like she wanted to say something, but no words came out. Her eyes darted between Mark and me, as if she didn't know how to fix this. Mark remained seated, staring at the floor as if it held all the answers. I couldn't breathe. The weight of the betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks, and my chest felt tight, as though I couldn't draw in enough air. The world had gone silent around me. The two people I trusted the most had just shattered my sense of reality. My best friend, the one who knew every secret, every vulnerable part of me, had crossed a line I never thought possible. And Mark, my husband, the man I married and vowed to trust forever, had kissed her, the one thing I thought would never happen. Tears welled up in my eyes, but I fought them back. I refused to let them see me break. I took a deep breath and managed to speak again, my voice steady but laced with pain. I need you both to leave. Claire opened her mouth to protest, but the words died in her throat. She looked at Mark, who still hadn't said a word, then turned to me. Her expression was full of regret, but that didn't matter anymore. Regret wouldn't undo what had just happened. Nothing could fix it now. Please, I said again, my voice quieter this time. Just leave. Mark finally stood up, but he didn't look at me. He didn't try to apologize, didn't make any attempt to explain. He just walked toward the door, Claire following behind him. As they left, I felt a cold emptiness fill the space between us. They didn't fight me, didn't try to make things right. They just left, as if our entire history together meant nothing. I watched the door close behind them, and the silence that followed was suffocating. The world outside seemed so distant, so irrelevant. I stood there for what felt like hours, trying to process what had just happened, trying to make sense of the shattered trust, the love I thought was unbreakable. How had I missed the signs? Was it all a lie? Was I just a fool, too blinded by my love for Mark and my friendship with Claire to see the truth? I sank to the floor, my hands covering my face as the tears finally came. The pain of betrayal, of losing the people who were supposed to be my closest allies, was unbearable. I didn't know how to move forward from this. I didn't know how to heal from a wound so deep. But one thing was certain. I couldn't go back to the way things were. The people I had trusted the most had crossed a line, and I couldn't ignore it. The betrayal would forever be a scar, a reminder that even the closest bonds could break in an instant.